Following Alen Babic's destruction of Sean Del Winters on the weekend, many have called for Dave Allen to be Babic's next opponent. Now, Dave Allen says he's going to get out in September. Alen Babic also says he's going to get out in September. I did a poll on the community tab of my YouTube channel, and as you can see on screen, 16% would pick Dave Allen by KO, 68% would pick Babic by KO, 5% Allen on points, 8% Babic on points, and just 2% a draw or technical decision. Now, going off that poll, the vast majority of people are picking Babic. But Babic is very inexperienced. He apparently had like 100 amateur fights, so that's a lot more than Dave Allen had as an amateur. But as a professional, he's had, 4 fights now? Can't remember how many fights Dave Allen has had, but it's a hell of a lot more than Babic. So there is some intrigue there because Dave Allen, as we know, is a very tough guy. He's been in there with the likes of Luis Ortiz, Dylan White, Tony Yoka, etc., Lucas Brown. So with that type of professional experience and the toughness that we know he has, it makes it intriguing against Babic. You know, you also knocked out Nick Webb, and that was one of the opponents they were looking at for Babic rather than Sean Del Winters. So I think most of us are in agreement about the fight in the sense that I like the fight, you like the fight, and the good news is Dave Allen himself likes the fight. He said so in a recent interview. In fact, Dave Allen thinks that this would be a very easy fight for him. He's called it a little run out. I think those are the words he used. Just a little run out. He thinks it would be like taking candy from a baby, basically. He thinks that Babic is very crude. He doesn't think Babic can stop him. He thinks that he'd be able to just outbox the guy, outskill him, and that he'd be too big for him. He sees Babic as a blown-up cruiserweight. So Dave Allen is happy to take the fight. I'm 100% certain Babic will be happy to take the fight. But here's the bad news. The bad news is that Eddie Hearn has already shot down any possibility of this fight happening this year. Eddie Hearn says that, and he said this in a recent Boxing Social interview, he says that Dave Allen is too experienced at this point for Alen Babic. He was basically saying he doesn't think that Babic can beat Dave Allen, or that it's unlikely. Now, we know that Eddie Hearn and Dave Allen have a bromance, let's just call it. So is he just trying to big up his friend Dave Allen, who he knows better than Babic? Is he actually trying to protect Dave Allen? Or is he really trying to protect Babic? Is he trying to build a fight up between Babic and Dave Allen to maybe have that in 2021? And doing it right now, maybe he feels like there's not going to be any crowd there. He's not going to be able to maximize the revenue from that fight. So he wants to delay it as much as possible. Because Dave Allen, even though he's not the highest caliber fighter, he does have a cult following. And so Alen Babic is also building up somewhat of a cult following. But that's not a pay-per-view fight. I'm sure it's run through Eddie Hearn's mind at some stage, but I can't imagine he would have the audacity to try and put Dave Allen versus Alen Babic as a headline standalone pay-per-view. He might put it on the undercard of a pay-per-view, but he's never going to make it a standalone pay-per-view. Now, Alen Babic versus Hrgovic, at some stage, if Babic keeps winning and Hrgovic keeps winning, he might try to do that as a pay-per-view, but he wouldn't do, at least not within the next year, he wouldn't do Allen versus Babic on pay-per-view. So he's looking to try and make some money out of that fight, possibly, and therefore, could that be the reason? Well, we know he's looking to make money out of it, but could that be the reason that he doesn't want the fight to happen right now because he wants to maximize revenue by actually having a gate and fans in attendance? Maybe he thinks it would be wasted having that fight with a tiny crowd or no crowd, let's say in September. Now, as boxing fans, we're disappointed by this. We don't want to hear Eddie Hearn say that the fight can't happen now, especially when the two fighters want it. We know Babic ain't going to turn that fight down. He's desperate to be moved quickly. I mean, Babic is talking about fighting Hrgovic now. Now, obviously, that ain't going to happen. But if he's willing to step in with Hrgovic now, then you know he's not at all worried about facing Dave Allen next in September. And Dave Allen himself said he's in shape and he's ready for Babic in September. So at this stage, the only way that that fight is going to happen, and remember, Babic is managed by Dylan White. He's not managed by Eddie Hearn. But how much sway can Dylan White really have in terms of pressuring Eddie Hearn to make that fight happen? Eddie Hearn did say that he wasn't particularly keen on Babic facing Sean Del Winters. But Dillian Whyte assured him that Winters is absolutely okay. That opponent is fine for him. Don't worry about it, Eddie. That's the opponent we want. So Dillian Whyte put his foot down as Babic's manager and told her, nope, it's going to be Winters. And that fight took place. Could he do something similar for the Dave Allen fight and put his foot down with Eddie and say, no, Eddie, we want that Dave Allen fight and we want it ASAP. We want it in September. Make it happen. Personally, I'd be surprised if Eddie Hearn plays ball. Yes, Dillian Whyte is Babic's manager, and Dave Allen, as far as I'm aware, is still a free agent. I don't believe he has any kind of contract with Eddie Hearn. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, in theory, could the fight happen? Well, at this current time, Eddie Hearn is one of the few boxing promoters who's actually putting shows on. And it's only really the major promoters that are managing to put shows on. The smaller promoters are really struggling. So that puts Eddie Hearn in an even more powerful and privileged position relative to other promoters, relative to other people who want to put shows on. So you're really at his mercy if you're Dillian Whyte, because if he don't want to put Dave Allen versus Alen Babic on one of his shows, he can throw whatever spanner in the works, come up with whatever excuse he wants to, then how's the fight going to happen? It has to have Eddie Hearn's blessing and approval. And right now, as I say, it doesn't look like Eddie Hearn wants the fight for whatever reason, whether he truly believes that it's too soon for Babic or whether he's just trying to build a fight up between the pair of them and maximize the revenue from it. But either way, as boxing fans, we're disappointed to hear stuff like that from Eddie Hearn. We hope that Dillian Whyte can pressure him to make the fight happen sooner rather than later. And I get what people are saying with regards to Dave Allen's experience as a professional. Now, Alen Babic apparently had 100 amateur fights or something. I'm, learning more about his amateur background. As far as I'm aware, again, correct me if I'm wrong, as some of you did last time, as far as I'm aware, Babic wasn't a top-level international amateur. He may have had a lot of amateur fights, but most of them were, regional fights or domestic amateur fights rather than international. He wasn't at the Olympics, as far as I know. He wasn't at the World Championships and all that kind of stuff, so on and so forth. But anyway, Babic has a lot of amateur experience compared to Dave Allen. Dave Allen has a lot of professional experience compared to Alen Babic. He believes he's too tough for the guy. And, I understand all that. But personally, I think you can take a risk with Alen Babic right now, putting him in against Dave Allen. Yeah, I think you can take that risk. Babic goes at 100 miles an hour, and you really wonder how long he can keep up that type of work rate. He says he doesn't care. He seems like a bit of a madman. And he's just going to keep going like that until somebody knocks him out or whatever. We'll see. Maybe he'll get his wish. But the thing about Dave Allen, even though he is experienced, in some of his most important fights, he has a habit of almost freezing, where he won't throw any punches, where he'll let the other guy get off all kinds of shots, and Dave Allen just stands there getting his head rocked around like a bobblehead doll. That's what Dave Allen has done in many of his fights, including fights that he's won, like when he fought Nick Webb. Nick Webb was teeing off on Dave Allen. I mean, Dave Allen wasn't throwing any punches. And it's all well and good biding your time, not throwing shots, if you're actually blocking the shots or slipping the shots. Maybe setting the opponent up for something. But Dave Allen doesn't bother to block or slip most of the shots. He's taking them on the chin and not throwing anything back. We saw it against David Price as well, where he just doesn't get shots off. We saw it against Dillian Whyte, where he just could not get any shots off. And these, in many cases are not particularly fast fighters. Would it be the same against Alen Babic? Would he struggle to get any shots off? Would Alen Babic be able to stop Dave Allen? Would he be able to inflict enough damage? Maybe facial damage? Personally, I'm not somebody to move fighters too quickly in most circumstances, but I do think that with Alen Babic, if I was managing him, it would be worth the risk of taking on Dave Allen next. It'd be worth the risk because the payoff would be tremendous in terms of his market value, at least in the UK. And apparently there's already quite a buzz around him in his native country of Croatia, particularly with his beef that he has with Hrgovic, his countryman, but also because he's been featuring on these, Dillian Whyte cards, Matchroom shows, etc. So for him to beat a guy with a cult following like Dave Allen, it would take him to a next level. And he wants to be moved quickly. Another thing is that's important is to keep the fighter happy. Yeah, the fighter might be a bit crazy, like Alen Babic. I think that's a risk worth taking with Dave Allen. So let me stop repeating myself here. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Are you disappointed that Eddie Hearn has shut this fight down already? Do you think Dillian Whyte can put enough pressure on him to make it happen? I think most of us have, pretty much no faith or no hope that a fight would happen in September. At, best case scenario, maybe December on the undercard of Whyte Povetkin 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out.